what part of my impossible dream is possible right now. We can only accept ourselves the way we are, and when we do that, there's an undoing that allows whatever it is that we're holding hostage about ourselves, the thoughts and beliefs, to dissolve away.
Welcome to Women We Should Know with international speaker, mindset reset mentor, author, and your host, Leslie Michaels. With audacious honesty and candor, the Women We Should Know podcast presents the wisdom and life-empowering insights of women who are the embodiments of innovation and social evolution. Please join Leslie as she shares potent conversations that will inspire your personal and professional evolutions.
Welcome back to another episode of Women We Should Know, the podcast where we bring the voices, the audacity, the brilliance, and the wisdom of amazing women to you, women who are coloring outside of the lines, who are challenging the status quo by refusing to climb into boxes that were created by someone else. Women who are reaching out to make dramatic, positive changes in our world and in the lives of others. And today we have just such a woman for you. Anne Sermons Gillis is an interspiritual minister, a life coach, and an author. She is often referred to as the Minister of Mirth. She co-founded Connection Church, the Connection Center for Spiritual Growth in Memphis in 1984, and served as the senior spiritual guide until 1998. Her wisdom, humor, and exuberant presentation style make learning fun. Armed with years of experience in human dynamics, Anne consistently delivers more than promised. She teaches people how to have accomplishment without struggle by presenting refreshing material that is immediately accessible. That's what we all need, immediately accessible. Yes, we've all seen tons of the other stuff. Life is not meant to be a series of to-do lists punctuated by eating and sleeping, says Anne. She is the author of 5 books and founder of the Easiosophy philosophy, and is on the board of directors of the Theosophical Order of Service and a national speaker for the National Theosophical Society. She lives in Somerville, South Carolina with her husband, Jim, and her dog, Lucy. And I am one of those people who is very proud to be able to call Anne a friend. Hi, Anne.
Oh, wow. Leslie, well, you are a friend to me too. And yes, we've been in touch with each other for a very long time. And I want to make a comment about that introduction. And that is that when I had Connection, I had someone come in, and it was a woman who specialized in PR.
Mm-hmm.
And what she told me and taught me when we would have events, she would say, you don't want to be shy when you're putting an event out there. It's almost like be hyperbolic and really put it out there. And so some of the wording in that bio actually was from a business coach when the easily accessible material that sometimes it sounds like, oh, this is just an amazing person. We want, when we put ourselves out there, to sound like super women. We don't want to be shy. We don't want to put ourselves back. We don't want to humble ourselves because there's so many people that are speaking now. What is going to set us aside so that people will listen to our voice? So I just want to make that comment because she really changed the narrative in which I presented myself, and I presented things to the public, like synopsis of my book, a synopsis of an event that I was hosting. It's important to be out there and not hold back at all.
Thanks for saying that. First of all, that's a great tip about the hyperbolic language application, but so many women do hold themselves back. They don't want to seem What is it they don't want to seem? I don't know what it is they don't want to seem.
Prideful.
Seem something prideful. They don't want to seem like they are overselling their value, and consequently they undersell themselves or don't at all. Just sit there and wait to be plucked off the shelf. And as we were speaking in an earlier conversation, no one's going to come along and pluck us off the shelf.
We are waiting for someone to discover us. We're waiting for someone to love us. It doesn't happen. We have to stop waiting. We have to make it happen.
Yes, yes.
Even the language, I can remember Phil Lott, who no longer is with us. He was the author of Money Is My Friend, but he was my business coach. And he said, I was like I'm the ambassador of ease because I've developed the philosophy Easyosophy. And he says, what you want to say is in your promo is that Ann Sermons Gillis is the leading expert in ease. And I'm thinking, I'm like suffering all over the place. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not putting, I don't want to put that out there. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to go for that. I am the leading expert in ease. I mean, it's like, who's going to say, what's she doing there? Is she nuts? She probably, most people say, oh, well, I need some ease.
That's right. Or even if they don't say I need some ease, they're going to say, I think she's someone I need to know. I need to know about. I need to read her books. Because I can see where that builds a subconscious trust with the people who are coming across you, that you have something that could benefit them. And you do.
And I want to go to the opposite of that too. And that is that radical vulnerability is something as well. Mm-hmm. I give a workshop on joy mastery. Mm-hmm. And many times when I've given that workshop, I was not feeling particularly joyful. Mm-hmm. And so what I would do, rather than pretend that I was joyful, was to say, I'm giving a joy workshop today. I'm not feeling joyful at all. How many people in the audience can identify with that? Maybe you're feeling depressed. Maybe you're feeling anxious. Are you feeling joyful today? Tell me, how many of you are not? Raise your hand. And I'm saying, let's figure out how to go to the state of joy together. Let's hold hands. Let's gather up our resources and our intentions, and let's move together. And so there's that hyperbolic self that we want to present, but then there's also this radically authentic self that we must present as well, because authenticity is powerful.
It is powerful.
Just as the hyperbolic side is too. So there has to be a balance between I'm somebody and right now I'm not feeling like anybody.
Right, right. Let's talk about a word that you just said. So many people fear vulnerability. I will hear it in sentences when people are in mentoring or any type of situation, and they will say, I have to stop now. I'm starting to feel overwhelmed and it's making me feel vulnerable. I believe vulnerability is a power trait, the ability to be vulnerable. What's your wisdom on vulnerability?
Vulnerability is a superpower. Because what happens is that when we feel vulnerable, then there are parts of us that feel vulnerable. What we want to do is that we feel afraid. We don't want anybody to know who we are. We don't want them to know our weakness, because if they really knew who they were, they wouldn't like us or love us or whatever.
Right.
So we develop this defense system, which is this wall. And what we know about walls is that walls do not make us safe. They make us more unsafe.
Yes.
They make it dangerous. And vulnerability is the door that we can use to walk through the wall in order to regain our power. Because when we have something to hide, and we don't want somebody to know something about us, it cripples us energetically. But when we move forth without any kind of sense of embarrassment into the moment and say, and we're just saying, I'm feeling really vulnerable. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cry. I had a woman speaker one time at Connection. I love it. And she was talking and she started crying. And she said, if any of you feel uncomfortable with someone that cries, you don't want to spend a lot of time with me, because I cry frequently. And this was one of the most powerful women spiritual teachers that I ever met.
It's amazing. I like to help people reframe it. There's vulnerability, which is strength, and then there's fragility. Vulnerability to me is like the sapling that can blow with the wind, where fragility is that vase that if you just tip it over the edge, it's going to shatter into a million pieces.
And I think that's probably an act, and that's why easiosophy really, I haven't used those words, but easiosophy addresses that. I mean, that's like a faux dramatic presentation to the world.
Yes.
It's so far away. It's another kind of wall, because when we are fragile and when we look fragile, no one wants to ask us to do anything because they think, oh, just ask her to do one more thing and they're going to fall over. So,
Right.
How can we be picked if we're in this complex group of feelings that push people away? So it's another
Absolutely.
kind of wall.
I know you speak with people a lot about relationships, whether it's the relationship with themselves, relationships with others, their partners, business, just the relationships of their life. What do you see as some of the most important, let us say, skills or points of willingness that we can adopt as we go forward to have stronger, healthier relationships?
There are a lot of different things we can do, but there's one specific thing, and I did give a workshop on the golden rules of conscious relationships, and I hold this one back until the last, but I'm going to come right out with it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, this is like this is very bottom level, and that is, if we like the person that's in front of us, we can get through anything. If we don't like them, it doesn't matter how many communication skills we have. It doesn't matter how many therapists we go to. It doesn't matter whether we say, I feel, when we're talking to them. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. When we like the person in front of us, we can work through it. And liking doesn't mean that I'm not angry with them in the moment. It just means that I've got an underlying sense of respect and care and compassion for that person. Like I'm saying, it doesn't mean that I'm not angry at them, because it's attitude. And people pick up on that. Because if we have this idea, you're a nuisance, you're a bother, you're stupid, all of these things that we've got running at mega levels of consciousness, we project that, and nothing will work. Whether this is someone that's working for us, whether it's someone we're working under, whether it's our mate, our next door neighbor, we have to continually re-examine whether we really like that person or not. And I think that is the golden rule of conscious relationships.
Don't you think that has to start with first liking ourselves?
Well, that's a chicken or an egg kind of thing, because what happens is when I can forgive someone's behavior and love and like them, it tends to take off my self-judgment. And on the other hand, if I take off my self-judgment, it's going to reflect on the other person. So if I can't love and forgive myself, if I continually generate compassion, love, and understanding toward other people, it erases my own self-deprecation.
Exactly. And we could all use a good erasing here and there.
Yeah, a detox.
A detox.
Emotional self-detox. And it's something that, no matter the level, for example, I know we all have felt this, and we think, after all this time, after all the work I've done on myself, I should really feel better. Well, maybe we do for longer periods of time, but we often kind of spring back to those earlier coping mechanisms that don't work.
They don't work.
And they don't work and we're trying to use those to fix ourselves. And really, we can't fix ourselves. We can only accept ourselves the way we are. And when we do that, there's an undoing that allows whatever it is that we're holding hostage about ourselves, the thoughts and beliefs, to dissolve away. But as long as we're trying to fix ourselves, if I'm thinking, I'm just so inappropriate, I'm not okay and all that, and I'm working on fixing that, it usually, like balloons, it gets worse.
Exactly. Because whatever we think or whatever we do, we tell the brain that's what we want more of. So if we're judging ourselves, it just mushrooms. How do you invite people to understand how to integrate their connection with, their utilization of their natural intuition within the context of creating more healthy relationships?
Well, that would be a part of what you were talking about, and that is that when we really understand ourselves, forgive ourselves, and we're okay with ourselves, then we can reflect that out into relationships. But in terms of intuition, I think that the first thing starts with either meditation or mindfulness, M&M.
Mhm.
Because what happens is that when we begin to experience what is going on with ourselves, then we can see how much we've shut down our natural knowing, how much we've shut down even our senses. For example, we could have some danger in front of us, but we're so self-absorbed that we don't even notice it. So we
Right.
have to come back into ourselves and begin to notice things. Meditation is a focus time when we notice things, but we really need to be mindful throughout the day, mindful of how we feel, mindful of what's going on with our body. And this allows our intuition to open up. And what our intuition does is it doesn't have any rules on how to relate to people. What it does is it gives us what we need in the moment,
Mhm.
because it can change even if the situations are similar or the same that we're in. Our response to it can change, and we have to be guided by that inner knowing about how to respond to that.
Mhm. Mhm. You use the word mindfulness, and I know it's something you have focused on for years, decades, as well as I have. But I see it cast about in our reading material and in our society. And I often wonder if people have a concept of what that means. What does mindfulness mean to you?
Well, for me, mindfulness means being present in the moment. I do want to say something about mindfulness. There's deep mindfulness, and that's what is being talked about today in so many different ways. I think that
Yes.
Eckhart totally opened the door to the mass consciousness when he wrote The Power of Now. And what it
Yes.
really requires is some kind of mindfulness. I was thinking that mindfulness goes beyond positive thinking, but maybe positive thinking is a step, because when we become mindful that we have negative thoughts, that may not be the deepest mindfulness, but it is a mindfulness. And that is, I am having thoughts that I don't want to have, and maybe let me change those thoughts. And
Right.
so that it's like a training wheel to get to the deeper mindfulness when we say, we're not even concerned about what the thought is, that we just notice what the thought is. So I think that we do have levels of training that we can go to, noticing our thoughts, maybe make a thought choice. We really can go into thought choice, which is not the ultimate thing. Thought surrender is maybe ultimate, but it's not that it has to be any one way.
Now
And
explain that for our listeners, thought choice and thought surrender.
Well, thought choice means that I'm choosing what my thoughts are to be. And that is, I have a thought I don't like, so I'm going to change that thought. For example, here's the thought is, as I age, inflation is going up at a rate that it's not gone up. It hasn't gone up like this for many years. And will I have enough money in the future? And so I think, I don't really like that thought. I am scared by that thought. So my choice is to have another thought. And that thought is that regardless of the economy, that I am always safe and live an abundant life. I have what I need when I need it. And that's thought choice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, thought surrender would be, I'm really afraid of the future. Inflation's going up. And then the next thought comes in. I don't pick it up and say, oh, there's a thought that I don't like. I just let it go. And the next thought comes in. It's like, what am I going to have for dinner? I'm noticing it goes by. I'm breathing. I'm paying attention to my body. And then it's like, I wonder what the dog is barking about. Notice it goes by. And that's thought surrender. And that is that I am not using the mind to define and interpret what I'm thinking. Because that's what we want to do. We want to interpret our thoughts. It's like,
Yes.
oh, what that means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is that all?
I know. We have to go inside with our pickaxe and our shovels and do archaeological digs on a regular.
Right.
See what's going on.
Yeah, it's like archiving our garbage. Oh, this fits
Exactly.
over there. This is what my mother did. And, I've been doing this for so many years.
That's right. Thank you for that explanation of your understanding of thought choice and thought surrender, because as you were speaking about thought surrender, that was the definition of how to be present now. And there's so much influx from Eckhart Tolle. Of course, we had Ram Dass, who taught that forever. And yet, when I hear people speaking about being in the moment and describing it, I don't even know what language they're speaking. And that was such a clear, concise invitation to just be in the moment.
I want to make a distinction. Probably everyone knows this, but the distinction is that when we say now, that there are two different nows.
Yes.
And one is the psychological now, which is attached to time.
Mm-hmm.
Now is I'm going to be in this moment, which is whatever time it is, this second, in this moment. And that is fine because it's a door to the eternal now, which has a sense of timelessness in it. And the eternal now doesn't have a sense of efforting in it, where often when we want to be present now, it has a sense of efforting or burden. It's like, oh, I'm not really present. Let me be, let me get here now. Oh, let me feel my breath. And so this kind of the efforting. The other one is this soft noticing. And it doesn't have a dialogue behind it. It's not telling us what we should or should not do. It's just moving into the direct experience one more time without internal dialogue. And so that now is really what connects us to our higher intelligence, which is our self. It's just our best self. They say that, we don't use our senses the way Aboriginal people have 17 senses, maybe they can use. I think I read that some Aboriginal people can see, maybe it's Mars that has these circles, or some of the planets has all these different circuits. Or
yes,
orbits.
I believe it is Mars.
And so they can see those, but we can't because our vision is occluded. And so we have the possibilities of just physically, I'm not even talking about metaphysically and beyond our own mental sphere, own personal knowledge. Just here, we do have the potential of being super beings. And there's a light and shadow side to that. The shadow side is, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure because I could be so much and I'm not. And that's what the ego will do. It co-opts every great idea we have, and it tells us
it is so true
how we're a failure at it, how we shouldn't do it.
Yes.
And then the light side of that is like, isn't that wonderful? There's something so much bigger than my training and who I thought myself to be that I have access to. I'm ready. I'm here. I'm excited about it. And that in itself opens us up to more superpowers.
And I think one of the most important parts of that is being excited to discover them, to not need to know in advance what that is, what it's going to smell or taste or look or feel like.
Yes, we don't have to sign up for a class, how to be a super being, how to use 100% of our brain. We can, but what happens again is that gets to be a shadow. And that's like, I'm not okay until I get this down, until I accomplish this, because we've got this old paradigm of that we have to be super productive. We have to accomplish things. We have to be successful. We don't have to be any of those things. It's okay if that happens, but I don't see that as the goal. I see that as the sideline of living powerfully our Dharma, which is what we're meant to do, how we're meant to be in the present moment. And I would say that often I'm more or less retired, and I produced a whole lot until this past December. And sometimes I don't know what to do, because I don't have all the things on my plate that I had before. And so I say, what do I need to do right now? And I'm not looking for anything that's great or wonderful or show worthy. It's just like, in this moment, what do I need to do? Now, in taking that all in stride and seeing that I haven't been productive, I had a dream. And in the dream, it was about, I told someone, it looks like you're having problems in your relationships. I can tell you how to have good relationships. And so I began to name some things about how to have good relationships. And my inner voice said, that's your next book. And so I wrote it down, and I decided that I would start working on a book on relationships. But that did not grow out of my need to find something to do. That grew out of my Dharma, that was the next thing for me to do. I wasn't trying to do anything. And rather than to jump into the thing like I usually do, because when I write a book, I often just work 24/7 and get very involved, I made an agreement with myself. And that agreement would be, I've got another project that I'm working on, the script that I did with an interview, and I'm correcting that script. But I made a promise that I would only work on that script 1 hour a day, and I would work on my book 1 hour a day, and everything else is free time. Whether that means that I get to work in my yard or whatever I want to do. Now I am 73, so I have, that advantage, and I'm not in the early stages of my career development or anything. However, it didn't matter. As I got way past the age that most people retire, I'm still going 24/7. And there's not anything wrong with that, but I just decided to experiment. What would it be like to have no pressure?
Right.
How does that free my energy? What does that give me? And so I made this agreement. I set a clock up there and I start working on my book. And I do what's called time blocking. And that is that when I'm there for that hour, nothing else. I don't take any phone calls. I don't do anything. That hour is totally devoted to working on the book. And then the next hour, when I choose that hour is totally devoted to working on that script. And it's only 2 hours. And I had the satisfaction of knowing that I've done something during the day. And I like, that's kind of like putting a little gold star on the day. Not that I have to have it, but it still comes up. This is the way I feel. I feel good about having done this work. And I don't need to apologize for that. I'm not doing this so that I can feel good about myself. I'm just saying that the dessert of this action and activity is that I feel good that I've done it.
Right. There's a difference between feeling good because we did something and we enjoyed it, and feeling good because, okay, I accomplished that next. I accomplished that next. I accomplished that next.
And that makes me okay. And if I'm not accomplishing something, I'm not okay. And that's so much of what's driven my life, is to just try to accomplish something, to try to change the world. And I've had degrees of letting go, because for many years, I traveled extensively in working in different areas to consciously make a change in the world. And when I became a certain age, what I realized was, because I was doing that, I wasn't taking care of me at home and what I needed to do. And so I stopped trying to make a difference and was very happy for all of those experiences and just said, okay, let's get home. Let's take care of my house, everything I need to do for me, and see how that works out. And of course, that took me a lot of different directions. And not that I'm saying anything is good or bad, but we do have seasons, and that's where that intuition comes in. It was time for me to travel. It was time for me to do those things. It was wonderful adventures, but it was time for me to stop. And I didn't, if I had pushed myself on to do things in the same way. Now, one of the things I thought was when I stopped traveling is like, how can I've always had this global international consciousness. It was like, how can I have this international consciousness feeling and stay at home and not travel? And as I perused the newspapers, I found things like International Conference on African Trade. And I thought, well, that's great. I think I'll go to that. And it was a free conference. I go to that, and that led me to all kinds of things. And then it was Ambassador so-and-so comes to Memphis, because I lived in Memphis at the time. It's like, well, how about if you go to these receptions and I meet the ambassador and I do this stuff? And I got all the same feeling and flavor and everything. And it worked out perfectly for me, because as I've said, I've always had this calling to an international and global arena in my life. And I didn't have to shut it off because I wasn't going to those places. There are openings everywhere, even if we're homebound. Emily Dickinson, I believe, is the one that, is a poet that never went anywhere. And she wrote of all these things. Whatever our state is, there is always destiny that leads us into our highest and our best. We can't look at our obstacles and say, oh, I can't be important. Oh, I can't do this. We have to know that there is no obstacle. I mean, even if we're bedridden. I mean, my gosh, look at Stephen Hawking.
Exactly.
I mean, there are no excuses. It's not that there should be a should. You should be doing something. I'm saying if we have a desire to do something, there's always something to do that will fill our hearts and our souls.
Exactly. And I come from the belief that if we have a great desire to do something, it's because something inside of us is telling us, you may not have the skills to get to the finish line, but you have the skills to start, and you'll learn everything else along the road.
Beautiful. Yeah, what part of my impossible dream is possible right now?
Oh, I like it that way. That's nice. What part of my impossible dream is possible right now? Ooh, that's a good one for the listeners to pick up and put on their bulletin board.
Because it always is true. There's always something we can do toward that.
You mentioned seasons. Everything does come in seasons. One of the things I'm seeing that is fascinating me to no end, in fact, I'm getting ready to write a series of articles on it, is women who are prestigious. They've accomplished a lot. They are equity partners in this or that or the other. And during the period of COVID, and now just after COVID, they're all saying the same thing. When I meet them and I speak with them, it's as if the memo went out and they're all reading from exactly the same memo. And I say, so tell me about you. Well, I'm in transition. I don't know what that means, and I am okay with it. And I'm loving hearing the I am okay with it part. And it seems that we've come into a season where there are a lot of women, junior to you and I, but still in their 50s, who are making big changes and are letting something inside of them tell them where the next step is, instead of planning it out the way they did their first career.
I've heard that as well. I mean, I have friends now that are retiring and just saying, I'm in transition and I don't care where it leads. It's just good not to even to have an agenda, because that, to me, that agenda, what I'm going to do next, creates that pressure. And often what we've done is we have identified with our pressure. If I don't have that pressure, I don't exist. And so we have to learn how and we can't really truly know who we are in our existence if we have identified with something that's not really us. And so taking that pressure off helps us more identify directly with who we are. And that is in the moment. It's not to define who I am by a role. I am a writer, I'm a minister, I'm a teacher, I'm a speaker, I'm an author, none of that. It's to identify in the present moment, to be in our center and to know who I am. I am centered in who I am. And with all that other stuff out there, we can't stay in that center.
We can't. And something that never ceases to amaze me, one of these days, it will no longer amaze me, but is the fact that that particular evolution you're speaking about comes back again and again and again. You and I, we've done our work. We've come to that place of recognizing ourselves, and then we go on with whatever the next thing is. And then there's that next place of, oh, wait a minute. I need to just stop for a minute and see who I have become now. And then you go forward and stop for a minute. And I think this is one of the areas that really trips people up, because they say, well, wait a minute, I already did this work. Why am I having to do it again? Do you experience that? And how do you guide people through that place?
You mean guide people through the place where they feel like they've come back to the same place again?
Yes, again and again and again, when it's really not. It's a progressive space, but they're not in recognition that it's the progressive states. They're feeling like Groundhog Day.
Right. Well, I think the first thing really is to take off, with anything that we're going through, is to take off any self-judgment about our process.
Mm-hmm.
Because that certainly isn't helpful. If I'm judging myself because, oh my gosh, I'm at the same place, that's a sense of shame, that's a sense of not okayness. And that's the very first thing I go to. Yeah, I love in tapping where they say, even though I am blank, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. So it's like, even though I am in the same place, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And so intuitively, I would work with each person on an individual basis. But so it might be that, that one person needs something, one person needs something else. So I can't really tell you exactly what the person would need, but definitely the first step is to take off of judgment. But I might say, okay, well, let's reframe it like this. And that is that this is happening so that you can learn more self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one way to look at this.
Mm-hmm.
Another one would be, this may be happening, and that's called asynchronicity. And that is, instead of things going really synchronous, we're having a lot of synchronicities, we're not. And it's like, well, this is maybe happening because you've been too prideful. Does that ring a bell? Because when we get too prideful about things, it's like the universe brings us right back down, and we have to take a look at that. And I've definitely been in those places and spaces. I mean, it's uncomfortable to say that, but I mean, where my pride has gotten in the way. And it's not like it's way back when.
Oh, not me. I've been perfect my whole life.
Well, what happens is that I can look at one way that I can look at pride, for example, if I'm looking at somebody, I'm thinking, and we're talking, and my thoughts are, well, they're not really very spiritually developed. Well, it's obvious they haven't done much work on themselves. It's a pride because the assumption is I'm the one who knows.
That's right.
I'm really, just such a great
I'm
person.
all that.
Yeah, I'm that.
All that.
They don't, And
that's
so,
right. I know you developed Easyosophy because you saw so much struggle and you wanted to give people a new way to move out of that. Could you speak to that?
Even though I didn't know this saying when I developed Easyosophy, Thich Nhat Hanh said, I teach joy because I've suffered so much. And that was actually why I wanted to teach ease, because I had suffered so much. And I began to examine the different kinds of suffering that I had in my life, to notice them, to be aware of them without judgment. It's like if I was going on an archaeological dig, I wouldn't pick up something and say, oh my gosh, what is this piece of shard of pottery? It's a broken piece of pottery. I'd say, oh, wow, where did that come from? And so going through an excavation of my own suffering, I began to find that I had different kinds of suffering. And some of the suffering was made up, and some of the suffering was not made up. And I noticed that I had a tendency to cover up the genuine suffering and make up suffering that I could share, or that was more inconsequential, like suffering about taking out the garbage, or suffering about having to do maintenance work in my life. And those things were not the things that I needed to be suffering about, but I would. Oh my gosh, not that again. And oh, the trash is going out today. I've got to be sure to take that. Just that burdensome way of dealing with life. And I really wasn't addressing the deep levels of suffering that I had covered up, that were under so many layers of denial. And this
actually a really profound point, that a lot of our self-created suffering is just as a mask to cover up what is real.
Yes. So we can change the stuff that's made up. We can change that immediately. We just have to know how to recognize it, because it's like, and that's when positive mind choices come in really handy. Positive thinking comes in really handy, because all that made up suffering responds really well to that. But what people do is they try to take these positive mind choices and apply them to the deep suffering, and you can't. And so this choice level has its place and its space, and it has the place where it can't go. It just it's not appropriate.
Right. So for our listeners who are out there, because we've all had manufactured and legitimate suffering, what would be 2 or 3 action points that you could give them to start applying in their lives today, to either identify the difference or to start making headway on setting some of it down?
One of my favorite ways to deal with pain really is to write down what I'm feeling in the present moment. And often what happens is that when we start writing about our pain, we start out with our defense systems coming out. But as we continue to write, something is undone in me, and we're writing, and all of a sudden we realize I'm just angry as hell. But sometimes it just takes a little digging to get to that. And I think journaling is a very wonderful way to do that. Another thing to do, which is a little strange, and that is to open up our creativity. And when I'm saying open up our creativity, that can be singing, something as simple as singing along with a song, and humming, those kinds of things that give us access to our deeper selves. And they begin to uncover things. And it sounds odd, but what will happen is that when we give ourselves those, it's like fuel of our soul, that the deep pain seems to feel safer in coming out. It's like we've had fun and we think, well, wait a minute, I'm having a great time, and all of a sudden I'm sad. It's like, no, we've fed our soul enough so that we don't have to be taking care of just the immediate surface things that are going on in our lives, and something deeper will come forth. Finding the pain doesn't need to be painful. In other words, we don't need to suffer about our journey of uncovering.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, we need to be creative in allowing it to emerge. And I think that's why things such as, who was it, Gabriel Roth, that did the dancing and so forth.
Yes, it was Gabriel Roth.
The
Yes.
ecstatic dancing, that when we
Mhm.
start to bring our bodies into this process, when we start to do things like I'm saying art, I think that we give ourselves a format to let that stuff begin to come through. And then there's simply the question, and that is, when I'm suffering about something, it is like, is this really difficult? Is this really difficult, or is this something that I've made up? And it may be, yes, this is really difficult. And it's like, well, if it's difficult, for example, if my feelings are hurt, well, it's really, yes, this is difficult because they hurt my feelings. And it's like, if I was in a good space and they said the same thing, would my feelings be hurt? And it's like, no. This is really a product of what's going on temporarily with me, because you've heard of hungry, angry, lonely, and
Yes.
tired, halt. This is just a temporary situation that I'm going through because I'm not in a really good space. And then
Yes.
we can dig a little bit deeper. It's like, no, this really hurts. Okay,
Mhm.
if it does hurt, we know that hysterical is historical. And what that means is it's really, really painful. Then it's probably triggering a lot of pain. And it's like, is this the time and place for me to go there? And it's like, yes. If it's not, we can promise ourselves, we can say, look, I'm going to go back and visit this afternoon. I can't do that right now. I'm at work.
Mhm.
I'm grocery shopping, and it's, I don't really need to stop and cry in the middle of the aisle, but I will go back here. And then we can go back and reenact that pain and see what it does. If we need to cry, cry. Just go on and cry. That's detoxification. If we need to feel anger, then feel that intense anger. If I just want to go like this, it's just, yeah, I'm really angry. And just let ourselves experience that, or watch what anger feels like in the body. Oh my gosh, when I'm angry, my body's tight. Experience the sensations of the body. There are just so many different ways that are percolating in the consciousness on the planet these days that allow us to get in touch with that pain. And that may be one of the reasons that we have so much drama going on with the planet, because everybody's pain is percolating. I mean, we carry not only historical from ourselves, but historical from our ancestors, and it's all percolating.
Right.
Whatever we don't transform gets transmitted to the next generation. And so having the courage to look at what's going on and to experience it it's a courageous act that we offer to ourselves and to humanity. But it's not about, one of the things that people have done in therapy is that we collapse into those feelings and almost worship them. It's like, oh, I am a person who is really angry or upset or hurt because my mother always did this, that, and the other. It's like, no, we can't get into the narrative like that. It's like experiencing what it's like, breathing through it, being present, and just being there until we're intuitively guided to do something else. I'm not sure that I'm actually giving you a 1, 2, 3 on how to do any of it, because that's why I go back to my intuition. The thing that I would say today would be something that to one person I'd say, they don't need to do that. And to the next person, like, they need to do that.
Right.
And that's why intuition is so important. If we have an intention, and that is, I'm willing to heal, I'm willing to do what it takes, and not suffer. It's like, I'm willing to do whatever. It's like, I'm willing to do. So there I am suffering over my suffering. That's the dramatics. I think it's time to drop the dramatics. I think maybe that we went through that in the 80s and the 90s and we're beating things. We need to drop the dramatics, experience the pain, and then allow our lives to move into the flow that is always there.
Well, that was better than 1, 2, 3. Because that was an actual walk through the forest, out of the forest. So thank you for all of that. And we could go on and on and on. But I guess we'll just have to go on and on and on off camera.
Okay.
Have you back another time. Thank you so much for being here today. And for all of you out there in listener land, you don't need to try to get a pen and write something down while you're driving or stop jogging to write anything down. All of Anne's contact information will be in the program notes. You know, I always put it there for you. I love putting all that out there for you. So you'll be able to find her books. You'll be able to find all of her contact and reach out to Anne to have more and extensive conversations. So thank you, Anne, once again.
My pleasure. It is always a treasure to be with you, to be able to speak to those. And I love you. And to anyone that's listening to this, I want you to know very genuinely that I love you too. It's not for my personality. You know, I'm going to always feel you loving me back too, because that is what we're about. One humanity, one love, one life, one light.
That's right. And I love you, Anne. For all of you out there listening, I know you got at least a couple of nuggets that you can pick up and stick in your pocket, take out later and examine, see what it means in your life, how it can help you to be more comfortable in your skin, more at ease as you go forward through your days. So do that. Remember to go back to that nugget. We have a tendency to pick those things up and then we forget. It's all the way next season before we put that jacket on again, and then there's that nugget. We don't know why it's there. Take that moment for yourself. And as you are going through your day, I'd just like to remind you, you are wiser and stronger than you know.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you received inspiration for expanding your own social innovation and influence. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at lesliemichaels.com/podcast. For more tips, insights, and support in creating a fully audacious, professional, and personal lifestyle you love, visit our Women We Should Know community on Facebook.